in the things they used to find pleasurable. So however much they want to go out and do the things they used to do, they find it so difficult. Why? Because depression is a brain disease. There is something that is not working in the brain. And so sometimes people tell them, snap out of this. But they can't snap out because they are sunk. It is persistent and the brain is not okay. So while we are saying it is a silent pandemic, you know, the meaning of pandemic, mostly we associate pandemic with diseases that are communicable, and they can be transmitted from one person to another. But actually, from what Dr. Lindy has told us, depression is a pandemic because it will affect everyone from the age of 3 up to the time you die. And there's nobody under the sun who will never get symptoms of suicide, depression, not even a single person. So what happens is that some of us will get the symptoms and we fight them using some factors that my colleague Dr. Hotel will share later. We call them protective factors. And so because of that, we don't actually become clinically depressed. Clinical depression is where you are taken to hospital, you are fed intravenously, you can't move, you are comatose, and you are vegetative. So we don't usually develop clinical depression because of protective factors, which we are going to share later. Depression and suicide are Siamese twins. That's why it is called a silent pandemic. It's because, unfortunately, it will kill us. It will kill you, it will kill me if nothing is done. Because it's a quiet mental illness. Quiet means that it's very subtle. It is very deceptive. And when the symptoms come, people feel ashamed to share with other people. Especially in Africa, in Kenya especially, we usually tell people, hey, ukona umama. Yani, when you try to share how you are feeling, especially when you are a man, unabiwa, ukona umama, you are told you are behaving like a woman. Because of this, people keep quiet. And that is why it is called the silent pandemic, and then it will kill you. So the statistics that now Linda is giving about suicide, 90% of the death that she's talking about, they come from depressive disorder. So thank you very much. That is the small background that I am sharing with you about depression. As we move on, we are going to share more. Thank you. Back to you, Lydia.
Thank you, Agnes, for that, starting us off. And as we continue, I know that we are having many of us from different professions. Many of you might be psychologists. And it's good to know that we are trying to tone down. We are trying to tone down using as limited, jargon as we can so that we are able to communicate to everyone. And with that said, Dr. Oteo, is it possible to tell whether someone is depressed? What is it that I'll see or note in a person that will make me know that this person might be having symptoms of depression? You're muted. You're muted, Dr. Oteo.
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you, Dr. Lydia, for this opportunity. First, I wish to indicate that almost everyone feels sad or alone at some point in their lives. As Dr. Akina said, at one particular point in time, you may feel sad, you may feel low, but what is the cutting line for the normal sadness and the normal and the depression that we are talking about? One of the reasons that Dr. Agnes projected why depression is a silent pandemic, it is because the way it begins, the signs, especially the other signs, are not noticeable, or they are least noticeable. So I want to answer that question from that point or from that background that most of the time it is slightly difficult to distinguish between the normal sadness and what we can call depression. Now, sometimes you may get people who internally they're feeling depressed, but outwardly they put the face that everything is okay. In fact, sometimes in other jargon, they call it smiling depression. So the most important thing that we need to get is the early signs of depression are least noticeable. And that is what we are telling our audience, that you need to stop and be observant to yourself or to their loved ones, such that you are able to notice those early signs. Like now, one of the signs, allow me to classify them, signs that are behavioral nature. Very simple signs that you may think they are normal, but it could be indicative of something that is worse. For example, in behavior wise, somebody does not show up, and that is not his characteristic. Somebody cancels an appointment, and that is not his characteristic. It's an area sign. And we're not saying everyone who does that is having depression, but we are talking about the area signs which you can keep on, and they are persistent, as Agnes said, that they persist for more than 2 weeks. In terms of appearance, a person all of a sudden persistently is unkempt. That's an area sign. In terms of thoughts, having difficulty in focusing and concentrating, that's an area sign. And then in affection, in the feelings, maybe the person is not enjoying what he used to enjoy. That's an area sign. And we are talking about the persistence. So what distinguishes our normal sadness and the depression is the duration. How long does it take? We are talking about 2 weeks. Then another thing is it affecting that person? Is it bringing distress? Is it bringing some kind of disturbance to the person and the people around them? Then another one, and coincidentally they are beginning with the D, is it making this person not to function or to do what he normally does because of that sadness, because of that hopelessness? And as we move along, you will find that apart from the area signs, we are having now the worsening signs that you're going to be able to see, like the behavioral worsening sign that the person withdraws from friends. The person focuses on negative talk. There's change in the sleep patterns. Then in terms of appearance, you will find that there's decline in the personal hygiene. In terms of thoughts, the person gets some kind of mental block or a blank. And then in terms of feelings or affection, there's increased fear and shame. And if nothing's done, now it leads us to another level of severity. We are calling the crisis side. Where now a person focuses or engages in very reckless behavior. The person is characterized by poor hygiene. The person feels some kind of hopelessness, and the person feels trapped. And if nothing's done, it can lead to suicide. So basically, what am I saying? There are 5 Ds that can make us distinguish depression from our normal sadness: duration, dysfunction, distress, danger to self and others. Then we have another type of depression, which is short term. We call it situational or reactive. It is normal for anybody when he has faced a situation, a difficult situation, he can be depressed, but that is short term. It is stress related, but it translates into clinical depression when it is persistent, when it brings some kind of dysfunctioning that is persistent, when it brings some distress, and when it makes a person out to be the danger to self and others. Thank you, Dr. Ari.
Welcome. Thank you very much, Dr. Otel, for helping us understand how we can know that someone is actually having symptoms of depression, even though they might be mild. Now, Dr. Agnes, are there people who are more prone to depression? You mentioned that we all may suffer from depression, but do we all suffer the same way? Are there some people who are likely to suffer depression than others? And if so, what are some of those factors that make some people more vulnerable than others? Welcome.
Thank you very much, Dr. India, and thank you, my colleague, Dr. Hotel, for sharing the symptoms with us. Actually, at the beginning, we said everyone is a candidate for depression. It occurs in a continuum from low levels to high levels. Now, why do some people go to the high levels and then some people go to the moderate levels? Why do some people go to high levels and some people go to moderate levels and some people go to the severe levels? It is because of the risk factors. The risk factors are called vulnerabilities. So we have 3 categories of risk factors, and why we are learning them is because you and I, we have to become advocates. We are doing sensitization so that we can do advocacy. So we look out for them in our families, we look out for them among our friends. So today, when we are through, you make sure you give a call to somebody. So one of the risk factors is the family history of depression. In some families, maybe your grandmother, your grandfather, some family members were depressed. So from today, you need to do a history of your family and try to find out because of self-care. Because the moment you know that there's depression in your family, then you are vulnerable to developing depression. Another condition is what we call a chemical imbalance. In our brain, the chemicals transmit messages from one part of the brain to the other. We have many chemicals, we have many hormones, like for example, serotonin, we have dopamine, we have GABA. So what they do, they are balanced. Usually God created us when they are balanced, but they can become imbalanced because of specific reasons, including drug abuse, and even heredity factors, and other experiences that we go through. So when they're imbalanced, then definitely you are vulnerable to developing depression. Then we have medical conditions, for example, cancer, diabetes, arthritis. These medical conditions are very bad. Chronic illness is one of the #1 cause of depression and the #1 cause of suicide because of the pain that is associated. And the medical condition like hyperthyroidism, and then hormonal changes during pregnancy, during menopause. These are biological vulnerabilities. Then we have what we call psychological vulnerabilities. Now, you and I, we are not the same. Some people, one of the psychological vulnerabilities, some people are chronic, they have chronic negativity. And actually, when you stay around them, you want to run away. Maybe some of you have friends like those. We call it chronic negativity. And this negativity is actually towards yourself, towards the world, that is other people, and towards every event. For them, they never see anything positive. That is a psychological vulnerability factor. So from today, as you go home, start reflecting, am I one of them? The second vulnerability factor is the childhood trauma. Imagine the children who are beaten physically, they are sexually molested, they are sodomized. Some of them are even gang sodomized. What do you think will happen even when they are adults? They are vulnerable to developing depression. And the other negative life experience, for example, loss and grief. Imagine losing your sister, your brother, they are following one another. You develop what we call complicated grief. Now, when you develop complicated grief, do you know what happens? You will definitely become vulnerable to developing clinical depression. And especially if you are already vulnerable biologically. Remember, if your family it has a history of depression, then you develop grief because of continuous death, continuous losses. Now you go to sleep and the people are thinking it's because your husband died. They are waiting for you to wake up, but you have already developed clinical depression. So when people are going through loss and grief, we have to watch out for them because it's a psychological vulnerability. So another psychological vulnerability is what we call unmet desires, unmet needs. So you don't have food, you don't have security, you don't have shelter. And as a result of that, now you are struggling, you're asking yourself now, what do I do next? Then we have sociological vulnerabilities. One of the worst is lack of social support. When you are lonely, you don't have someone to talk to. I usually encourage people from today, have a family WhatsApp group, please. Have a family WhatsApp group. Because social support, lack of social support is very bad. And when some of the family members become depressed and commit suicide, they don't even have someone to speak to. So lack of social support. Then we have poverty. Extreme poverty is not actually good for mental health. Low socioeconomic status has been found to be a vulnerability factor. Spirituality and religion that is banned, for example, being in a cult, is a vulnerability factor. And being in a religion that is fundamentalist, it usually becomes a vulnerability because of the rituals, the beliefs, the practices that they can subject you to. Some are subjected to sexual orgies, and some are subjected to things that are actually very bad. Finances. Money is one of the #1 cause of depression, because you know what happened during Corona. During Corona, we lost our jobs and people got depressed. And some of the family caregivers, they even ran away, especially the men, because everyone is waiting for them to provide, they can't provide. So we have finances, and they are really a very big factor in terms of causing depression. So we call them biological, psychological, and sociological factors. So what I've given you is a summary, but you can reflect about yourself and ask yourself, what I have, is it a psychological vulnerability? Is it a biological vulnerability? Is it a sociological vulnerability? And is there something I can do about these vulnerabilities so that I can be able to fight the monster? Because now we are here so that we can do what? So that together we can fight, we can remove stigma, we can go to another level. So that is what I can tell you regarding that. We will be sharing more as we move on. Thank you very much. Back to you, Lydia.
Thank you, Agnes. It appears like as we go on, we shall go diagnosing ourselves, even as we continue with the listening. Maybe that is where we shall know how to move. Dr. Oteo, kindly explain to us the concept of suicide, and if there are any warning signs to look out for in a suicidal person. Sorry.
Thank you, Dr. for this opportunity again. Maybe before that, I just wanted to comment a call that I got from a colleague and a principal who asked me why are young professionals committing suicide and they were having depression. In fact, what just Dr. Agnes has commented, our relationship with money. Our relationship with money is wanting. You see, for those of us who are in the 50th floor, you can tell me that getting a loan those days was so difficult. But right now, people are lending, loans are being bought, literally. And we have found ourselves in financial pitches that we are unable to come out of it. And we want to live life that is beyond us. In fact, majority of the people, where could be one of them, we are spending the future income in today's expenses, and we find ourselves in a cage and we're struggling to come out of it. And that is one of the major contributing factors to depression, and by extension, it affects suicide. Now, let me answer the question that you asked me, the concept of suicide. From my background, when somebody mentioned about concept, what comes is I need to create a mental picture to the audience. Anyway, basically, so I'm not just defining. Suicide is death caused by self-harm with an intent to die. And there are various suicidal behaviors that we can talk about. One is the completed suicide, whereby the person intentionally harms himself and that leads to death. The second form of suicide is the attempted suicide, where the person intentionally, he wanted to harm himself, but fortunately, it doesn't die, although unfortunately to him or her, because he wanted to die, but fortunately for the loved ones. Then we also have what we call suicidal ideations. That is having thoughts about killing self, the method that you're going to use, when you're going to do it. Those are the ideations, suicidal ideations. Then we have what we call the suicidal plan, the preparatory acts of the suicide, what you are planning to do. Then, I think you saw this sometime, could be 2017, 18, somewhere there, what we call the copycat suicide. There's what we call the weather effect, whereby, if you remember a case of a young person who watched a video, viral video, and certain frustrations were there, and they went ahead to commit suicide. It's a form of copycat suicide. We call it the weather effect. The story about a young person who was frustrated romantically, he committed suicide and decided that any majority of the young people could watch it by either remembering that emotions are contagious. You see, I don't know whether this happens to everyone. Having the background of literature, I remember majority of us, we know things for a fact. When majority of us were taught and a Congo killing Gemefuna, we felt so bad, basically because emotions are contagious. So that is copycat suicide. Then there is what we call non-suicidal self-injury, where a person harms himself, but his intention is not to die. Then the last one is the para-suicide, whereby a person engages in a suicidal gesture to get attention over either the family or the friends, where we get the people scaring others, I want to kill myself. So basically, those are what I can talk about the concepts. Allow me a few minutes to talk about the warning signs, because that is the most important. Allow me, because that is me for you. Acronym. Symbol steps. The first warning sign, which begins with the S, is a person having self-blame, self-loathing, and this leads to withdrawal because he wants to avoid shame. There's a lot of self-blame. There's a lot of self-loathing. There's a lot of negative talk about self. The second sign that you look for, a person who's likely, is ideations, the thoughts of self-harm. Sometimes which is expressed in either their speech or in their writing. They are writing, posting the social media. The M for you, remember, simple steps. The M for you is the change of the mood changes, sadness. Sometimes they feel some kind of factorless quagmire of despondence and helplessness. Then B for purposeless, losing purpose in their life. They don't see the meaning of their living. Then L for, they feel a lot of loss. Sometimes you may find that this person engaged in a particular behavior and they got a lot of loss. They have a lot of regrets, and those regrets, the loss is a very good symbol sign of suicide. The last E is the early attempt. If, for example, the person has attempted earlier, is more likely again to engage in that behavior. That is symbol for you. Then steps, most of the time, when people are overwhelmed, the demands and stresses of life, sometimes people engage in self-medication through the use of substance. So substance abuse. Then T4, people feel trapped. They feel that they are not moving. They are not making any progress, so they feel trapped. Then N4, that is negative emotions. That is negative emotions, sadness, anxiety, worthlessness, hopelessness. Then Agnes talked about protective factors. If, for example, a person feels that there are no resources around him, nobody is there for him, nobody listens to him, so those lack of protective factors can be indicative of all the person talking about how the family or certain protective factors are not working for him. And lastly, the person is talking about the stressors and the demands of life. So basically, for the purpose of remembering, the simple steps, self-loathing.
We lost you, Dr. Oteo, or is it me?
He's silent.
Yes, we've lost him. We've lost him.
Yes, he's silent.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that. Maybe before he gets back and I'll request Dr. Ndangi to progress on. And Dr. Ote, we lost you.
Sorry, I was just giving a summary of my academic steps. I talked about cell blotting, S, change, mood changes, loss of purpose, experiencing loss, early attempts, substance abuse, feeling trapped, negative emotions, lack of protective factors, and stressors. Talking about the stressors so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I believe you have gotten the summary. And now over to Agnes, Dr. Agnes. How does depression relate to suicide? Are they related? You said in a way you alluded to it as you talked about depression in the beginning. And I could see there was a question asking whether suicide is actually a symptom of depression. So are they related? And what are the risk factors associated with suicide other than those that are associated with depression? Karibu, Dr. Arif.
Thank you very much, Dr. India. Just to add something on what my colleague was sharing about the red flag for suicide. So when you see somebody online every time and what they are reading, the materials they are reading online is about violence, it's about death, it's about pornographic materials, everything that is having violence, actually that is a symptom that it's a red flag for suicide. And there's another red flag that usually it escapes people that the previous day before the person commits suicide, they have elevated mood. Their mood is very elevated. So they can share a Bible verse with you, tell you the way they believe in Jesus, and they are very happy, they are smiling, but previously they were sad. But suddenly they have a very elevated mood. It's a red flag. So when they are very happy, you will find that the following day they have committed suicide. So be watching on that. So when a family member is feeling low and suddenly they have an elevated mood, please be checking out on that. Then let me answer what Dr. Linda is asking me about now. Is there a relationship between depression and suicide? Actually, when I began, I said that depression and suicide, they are Siamese twins. Because depression is a common mental illness, depression is responsible for over 90% of suicide. Why? Directly or indirectly? Number one, it is the commonest mental illness. But even when it is not the major mental illness, it will usually occur with another mental illness. So that they can be having anxiety disorder. I'm having PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, the one we were talking about last week. But at the same time, I'm having depressive symptoms. And so that is why when you do assessment on the people who have committed suicide, they will either be having depression as the primary sickness or depression that is comorbid with some other mental health conditions. And so yes, there's a big relationship between depression and suicide. So we have other risk factors that cause suicide apart from depression, but the major one again is the other mental illnesses. So the commonest mental illnesses in making people to kill themselves is schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is where you hear voice. They tell you, kill yourself, throw yourself down, kill yourself, throw yourself down. That is schizophrenia. Then we have bipolar. Bipolar, it has two poles. Excessive mania, a lot of excitement. During excitement, you can commit suicide. And during the second pole, you can commit suicide. And then the substance use disorders, which we are talking about next week. Those are three major risk factors for suicide. But all the 22 categories of mental illnesses, because we have 22 categories, major categories, and we have over 300 categories of mental illness, all of them can become risk factors to committing suicide. So in short, now what we are trying to share here is that you and me, we should know that we should stop stigmatizing the people who commit suicide, please. Remember, the church never used to bury them, even the Catholic Church where I belong. But it came a time they had a meeting and they began to bury the people who commit suicide because they came to discover that suicide is a symptom of mental illness. So we have to change the way we have been handling these people, please. The other factor is being a man. Being a man is a risk factor. because men are 2 to 4 times likely to die by suicide compared to women. Okay, women will attempt suicide more, but many women, they don't attempt actually to die. They organize in such a way that they can be rescued. But when men organize to commit suicide, they actually organize to die. So the prevalence is very high among the male child. So please start taking care of the boy child, because we usually ignore them when they say they are depressed, because they are 4 times likely to die. So you can imagine what that now means. Another risk factor, of course, is being young. According to what has been established by psychiatrists, the people who commit suicide predominantly, they are between the age of 10 to 29. So being young is actually a risk factor. And you see young people are going through a lot, and we look at them and we call them, these young people are confused, these young people are 1, 2, 3. No, the young people have a brain sickness. Even you, when you have a brain sickness, even if somebody tells you to come out of that, you actually can't. So we need to actually support them. Then another risk factor is the previous history of suicide. If the person has attempted suicide before, then they are likely to commit suicide. So they need to be observed by family members and given support. Then we have dysfunctional families. I think in the social media, we are always seeing dysfunctional family with a lot of conflict. So what happens in many families is what we call homicide suicide. So my husband will come and kill me, and then he will kill me and the children. Then he will kill himself. That is a risk factor, being a dysfunctional family. Of course, we've already talked about money. Money, like when there's no money and there's high levels of stress, somebody can say, okay, let me just wipe out my entire family, we'll go together, or I'm useless, and then they suffer hopelessness. And then, of course, now they will definitely commit suicide. Then alcohol and substance abuse. What we are going to discover as we talk about substance abuse next week is that many of them are depressant. They usually depress the central nervous system, causing depression. And when they cause depression, definitely it will result to suicide. And then exposure to a lot of violence because of the careers that are. There's some careers by themselves, they are risk factors. For example, the career in the police, the career as a medical doctor, a nurse. Why? Because the nurses and medical doctors, they can access medicine that can make them to commit suicide, the mortuary attendant, and the other people who are working in the health sector. And then the police and the military, because now they have access to what? They have access to weapons. And then artistic suicide, which you see yourself to go to heaven, or you believe that you are doing a service to a higher power, which is now associated now with religion, it also becomes a risk factor. So we have to watch out on those risk factors because they are here with us, and sometimes when especially young people, because they are the most vulnerable, 10 to 29, when we see some of these risk factors that are affecting them, now we have to become ambassadors, we have to do advocacy, we have to become our brother's keeper. So I'll stop there and hand back to Lindia. Thank you.
Thank you, Daktari, for that passionate presentation of the risk factors and reminding us that we need not stigmatize people who attempt suicide because there are factors that are associated with why they take that decision or why they would want to go that way. Having said that, many of us are likely to be taking care of people who might have attempted suicide before, or people who are likely to be suffering from depression. Does that make us suffer in any way? Is there a way in which maybe the fact that one is taking care of a person who may have attempted suicide or someone who is depressed, do they get affected, Dr. Oteo? What are some of the effects that they can have? And what are some of those effects, if they are in?
Thank you so much, Daktari, for the opportunity. Allow me to take 1 minute to comment something about the risk factors, especially the social media. Social media has been found to be a risk factor for both the depression and the suicide, especially what is posted in the social media sometimes is make others to feel some aspect of inadequacy in themselves. With the technology and the Photoshop and the other advances, People are representing ideal things about themselves, and because naturally we want to compare with ourselves with our peers, that in a way makes people or others to feel inferior, make others to feel inadequate. And if, for example, they have an underlying mental condition, they can aggravate or exacerbate depression, and that can lead to suicide. There's even the aspect of cyberbullying. We have seen people's private videos being shared in the media. We have seen there's an effect we call the fear of missing out. We call it the FOMO effect. People, they get so much to the social media, and that disconnects them from the normal social connectedness. And the social media, of course, you feel connected to the virtual platform, but in a way you are isolated, you are alone, such that people do not know what you are going through, because you are away from the family, you are alone in that room, interacting people with the virtual platform who do not know you and who do not know your conditions. So then there is an aspect of, there's a lot of content that is so viral in the social media. In fact, we call it the weather effect. Emotions, the word emotions is derived from the word mofere, which means to move. Emotions are contagious, especially for young people. They see, then they affect. That's what I can say. Let me go to my question. What does it take to live with a person living with depression and suicide? Research has shown caregiving for physical illness and caregiving for mental illness. In fact, the one for mental illness is more demanding than the physical illness. In fact, they talk about it this twice. What do you compare? Then 20% of the family caregivers who are taking care of people with mental illness, not necessarily depression, not necessarily people with suicidal behaviors, 20% they are more likely to suffer from depression than the general population who are not taking care of others. So, in a way, we cannot really say that it is the demands of caregiving in a way that leads to this depression. But allow me to analyze. For example, the person can be overwhelmed, but he cannot pardon a loved one. So, in a way, it's a dilemma whereby he doesn't want to pardon the person at the greatest point of need, but at the same time, he's feeling overwhelmed. He's feeling like the heavy load is too much on my side. So the strain that comes by giving the best provision in terms of care, the sacrifices that the people make, the physical and the emotional sacrifices that people make such that they can take care of their loved one, it can make a person to be depressed. Then, if it is, for example, in a family background where we are helping husband and wife, obviously, if the spouse is sick, that means the relationship needs are not met. That sometimes people are taking care of the loved one, especially depression. Sometimes they may have self-blame, thinking that they are responsible for not the person recovering or the person being depressed. So, basically, what are we saying? The effect of caregiving, the sacrifices that the people put for caregiving, can be so overwhelming and it can lead to depression because the person is on a dilemma. He can't move away. He has no option.
We seem to have lost him. Dr. Ndangi, could you go on that line? Please unmute. Kindly unmute.
Okay, sorry. So I'll pick up from where my colleague has stopped. When you are taking care of loved one, it will take a toll on you. It must take a toll on you. So what happens? We become very anxious. One of the commonest mental illness that develops among the caregivers, especially we call them the primary caregivers. Primary caregivers is your big sister, small sister, your mother, your father, your best friend. Some of the people are taken care of by the best friend. These are primary caregivers. So they become anxious and they can develop anxiety disorders. They are not able to sleep. It's another effect. They actually develop insomnia, and depending on their personality, because some of them are already vulnerable and then they become caregivers. Some of them now develop psychosomatic, we call them psychosomatic, yani they develop physical sicknesses that are as a result of observing that sick person, being with that sick person. So they develop fatigue, you see, they develop headaches, migraine headaches, they develop diarrhea, and they can have even heart conditions because of that continuous caregiving. Yes, I have seen it happen to my sister when she was taking care of my father. She began actually to get sick. And if I wasn't a psychologist, my sister became irritable and she can shout at you. And I began to ask, is this really my sister? It's because of the effect of that continuous caregiving. So then another effect is actually burnout. So all of a sudden you are tired and you don't want even to take care of the person you are taking care of. Why? Because burnout is uncontrollable levels of very high stress that makes you dysfunctional to the extent that you have to go to hospital, because biologically now you cannot be able to function. Emotionally, you cannot be able to function. In terms of thought, you feel as if you have fog. Yani, your mind is covered in fog. You have developed burnout, my dear. And so this caregiving is not easy. And that is why we have to, now because we are the caregivers, the people in this forum, I'm sure you have someone somewhere you are taking care of, or you know of a friend who is taking care of somebody. That is why now we are educating ourselves to know that primary caregivers, they need what? They need support. That is the addition that I will make on Dr. Hotel's
Thank you, Terry, for rescuing me because of my network. If I can add something.
Okay.
Kindly go ahead, Dr.
Chair.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm happy that my sister added something. I was almost going there about the compassionate fatigue that the person. Well, good friends, we are not creating a very gloomy picture in this case. When you find yourself in this situation, what do you need to do? What do you need to do as an individual such that you also don't affect negatively the person that you are taking care of? The first thing we need to acknowledge as an individual, in fact, I call it act. As an individual, you need to acknowledge that the caregiving is a challenging task and you need to address the effects of it. Then, C4, you need to cope and connect with others. You are not alone in that family. You are not alone. Call upon the friends. Call upon other loved ones such that you can work together. Sometimes we possess patience. Sometimes we possess loved ones. So good friends, see for you, connect, hope, and at the same time connect with others. Then lastly, P4, tell the story. Sharing is very therapeutic and it motivates others. For those of us who are in TikTok, you see sometimes people giving the testimonies of they have taken care of their loved ones. You can learn one too. What about for the people we are taking care of? As much that is overwhelming because you find yourself in a dilemma. Listen to them. And listen to them in an acronym, listen and judgmentally, communicate care, involve them. As much as people are struggling with their mental illness, they are people first, involve them, don't assume them, support them. That is S for support them. T for tell them that they are not alone and the depression is a process. There are setbacks. But they can be able to overcome. Encourage them that the depression is preventable and treatable, and connect them with the network that is listen for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Listen.
Dr. Oteo,
Thank
I
you.
think you have alluded to some of the measures that can be taken to mitigate the effects of caregiving, and also a bit of some prevention measures that we can do. And because of our time, Dr. Ndangi, what are some of the treatment interventions that are available for depression and suicide?
Okay, before that, Dr. Linda, because I was meant to answer this, I think I can add one point that I think is actually very important. So for the caregivers, the best thing is to know yourself in terms of stress tolerance. Where are you? Because now you need to monitor your stress. So when you monitor your stress and you start getting overwhelmed, before you develop burnout, anxiety disorders, depressive disorders, please, you need to seek help or to break that by self-care routine. So because if you die and you're taking care of your mother, now have you helped your mother? No. So you have to develop a self-care routine that can work for you. So you have to get somebody else to stand in for you, go for exercise, go for prayers, go and dance if you like dancing, come back having researched yourself. Because the moment now you stay there, it will become very bad for you. And then another thing is join a support group for caregivers. We just like the way we have a support group for cancer survivors, accident survivors, we have a support group for the caregivers. So that when you go there, you can share the challenges, you can encourage one another, and when you come back, you are actually feeling better. So make sure that you don't get overwhelmed with caregiving. And remember what I've told you. Actually, I've told so many people during my practice to open WhatsApp group for the family, even very difficult family members. When they come on board and you call them for a meeting, they will come because I've seen it working. So from today, make sure that when you go, you do something differently in your family so that you can have that social connectedness. Instead of leaving your brother, your sister to take care of your mother, to take care of other people by themselves. Thank you very much. The other part that we were supposed to hand is the preventative part, which I'm not sure, because Linda is asking at the last part. But I think the protective factors are very, very important. And Dr. Oteo was supposed to share just a few of them, and then I can share the treatment intervention so that we finish the part of the prevention. So maybe, Dr. Oteo, you can share like the key ones, like 2 of them or 3 of them. Then I can go to the treatment intervention, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria, for that. Of course, I looked into it when we were sharing. You see, protective factors that are there to mitigate. They are there to mitigate the risks and even protect or inoculate the person from the risks that we are talking about. And these many protective factors, there could be factors within the person, what we are calling the assets, or they could be resources around the person, that is outside the person. So as we have said, it has to begin with the person. And if that person is having some inadequacy or some inability, it can be assisted to develop that that is serious. Because we can't run away from the demands of life. We can't run away from the stresses of life. But the most important thing is, how do we feel, for example, the fortitude of the person? How do we feel the resilience of the person such that when he meets the demands of life, he can be able to overcome? Especially our young people, if they're taken through some lifestyles, life skills and life practices on how to cope with life, on how to deal with the demands of life, they can be able to overcome. But unfortunately, especially my generation, we are taking
Okay, I'm sorry, my colleague has been thrown out. Dr. Linda, can I continue?
Yes, please continue, and we just have 3 minutes for
and the second aspect is prompt. We talked about warning signs. It's good promptly to fix it before it becomes worse. That's a protective factor. How can we inculcate the future hope of of our young people because they are more vulnerable than others. Then another thing is, of course, the aspect of connectedness. That is in terms of social connectedness, in terms of the family, in terms of the friends. Then the aspect of, we have really talked about finances, and finances is becoming a very contributing factor. There is financial literacy, and our relationship with money, it is very key in trying to stabilize people who are at risk to engage in that, among others. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Over to you, Ntanki.
Thank you very much, India. I can see I have only like 3 minutes. So because the part of treatment, Linda has told me to share about treatment, because the part of treatment is very short. I will finish within a minute. Let me share additional protective factors. So protective factors, what they do, they prevent. They will prevent. Because honestly, my dear sisters and brothers across the world, we would wish not to get mentally sick. We would wish not to commit suicide. And so these protective factors, they can help us. So one of them that has been established by research is that spirituality and connecting with God. It has been studied psychologically. It's called the neurological dimension in psychology. The people who have a relationship with God are more likely to actually not get depressed compared to the people who don't have a relationship with a higher power, whoever you perceive it to be. The other one is self-awareness. You have to know your strength, you have to know your weaknesses, your stress tolerance levels, and your family history. The other one is emotional intelligence. You know, when you are emotionally intelligent, you are able to do emotional regulation. Instead of throwing tantrums, instead of experiencing emotions too deeply to the point of now becoming sick. Another one is gratitude. If try to keep a gratitude journal, you will see what happens. So you write every morning, you write every evening, keep it. Another one is a positive self-esteem. Because I can see we are many on the platform, some people, if assessment was done, some of you have low self-esteem, others moderate, others high. Please start working on self-esteem because it's a protective factor for you not becoming mentally sick. Then we have a positive, optimistic attitude. People who are positive, it's the opposite of negativity, definitely. That's a protective factor. They look at a factor now, the ones that we call external factors. Look at a factor like regular medical checkup. It's a protective factor because in Africa, we don't like regular medical checkup. So we have proper time management and we have proper financial management because money is one of the #1 cause of depression. And Dr. Ocho has already told you that Kenyans live above their means. Please let us not compete with other people. Let us live within our means because when we get overwhelmed by debt, we actually get very sick. Then adopt a healthy care plan. Do exercise, eat good food. Like now, Kenya, I can see people are really struggling now to start eating healthy. It's a protective factor. Exercise, eating good food. I have 1 minute. Eating good food and making sure you drink 8 glasses of water per day. You know, we call it a self-care routine because it's a protective factor from being depressed. Avoid alcohol and avoid substances. Keep romantic relationships that are healthy. Because the moment you get other people out there, you will get mentally sick. That one, it is a protective factor. So when you have romantic relationship, make sure they are equal. Then make sure the environment you are living is clean and mitigate the negative effect of your workplace because you go to work every day. And the workplace is the #1 cause of mental illness. So those are some of the protective factors that have been studied. They have been shown that they work. And if we implement them, instead of getting now mentally sick, we will actually become champions now for mental health. We will help our family members. In terms of treatment, I'll just take 1 minute. Treatment is only 2 categories. One of them is medical treatment, which we call psychiatric treatment, where you go and see a psychiatrist because like when depression is severe, you need medication. We call them antidepressants, and there are like 6 categories of antidepressants. So the second treatment, okay, in addition to antidepressants, we have nutritional therapy because there's some specific food that can be recommended for you. And we have surgery. surgery, and another one we call it electroconvulsive therapy. These are now biological treatment, and we discuss that routine with the psychiatrist, apparently when depression is actually severe. The second is now where the psychologists come in. We call it psychotherapy and counseling. So you book a session with a counselor, you book a session with a psychologist. When you sit down with the counselor and when you sit down with the psychologist, they already know evidence-based practice. We usually call them evidence-based practice. So we have evidence-based practice that have been found to work. So the counselor will help you, the clinical psychologist will help you, the counseling psychologist will help you. Like now we are counseling psychologists. So before I talk, I'll now tell everyone who is here, don't feel stuck. We are here. And in the first webinar they sent, the number was not working. So we have given you a number that is working. So you are free to make a call to that number so that you can actually be helped. In case you yourself, you want to see a psychologist, we are able to link you to services. We are able to, part of engage which service you require, and we link you to service, and where we can help, we are going to help you. So we combine the two treatment intervention. We combine medicine and then psychotherapy, or what we call counseling. So I'm going to stop there and give it back to Dr. Lydia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Oteo. I can see you have something to say, but not in a minute. Dr. Oteo?
Thank you so much. I wanted to encourage the members that irrespective of the more role that they are going to play or they have been playing, it is very important, because one of the major reasons that make mental health challenge to be worse is because there is lack of intervention at the early stage, the primary level. Because statistics showing we do not have enough psychiatrists, we do not have enough psychiatric nurses. Even the psychologists who are here, some of us, we may not be able to counter the challenge of a mental health person. So my hope and the hope for this webinar is we want to acknowledge all those interventions, but it begins with you. What is this that we need to do as a community, as a family, to revive our loved ones and to assist where we can, give them support, social support, financial support, such that they can seek professional help. But at the same time, we need to understand them, we need to understand their condition, and we need to support them, what I call positive hearts. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for breaking it down for us. We now know that there are things we can do. Many of them are things that are not extraordinary. Just eating healthy, ensuring that we are keeping our social network, keeping a daily routine, things that we can do on a daily basis. I can see there is a lot of interaction on the chat. There are a lot of questions being asked. And I welcome my colleague and my co-host, Dr. Thomas Kinga, to bring us the questions. And thank you very much for the constant interaction. And I can see some of them are being answered. Dr. Kinga, kindly.
Yes, please. Thank you very much, Dr. Lydia. Also, thank you very much to the panelists, Dr. Agnes and my colleague, Dr. Oteo. I've got a few questions and I'll go straight to them. Quite a number, so I will sample the most critical ones. Tabitha Susan asks, if someone is constantly communicating that they want to commit suicide, how can they get help? I'll put that to Dr. Ndangi. And Dr. Oteo, if you could respond to this other question by Hope Gatugi. Hope Gatugi talks about someone who lost a loved one through a road accident, has been suffering extreme symptoms of bereavement and having suicidal tendencies. How can they be helped? Let's look at those two first. beginning with Dr. Agnes.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas. Sorry, I was responding something on the page. Can you repeat the first question, please?
Yes, it is from Tabitha Susan, who is asking, how do you help someone who is consistently threatening to commit suicide?
Okay, thank you very much, Tabitha. The way you help them is actually to, okay. Now, before you can refer them to the professional, the way you help them is to ensure that you become their friend. You give them your mobile number. You assure them they can call you in the middle of the night, that you are accessible to them. So make them feel that they're free. They can share with you their feelings, whatever feelings they have, they can be able to access you, and they are help to connect them. If, for example, you're asking as a counselor, then you need to help to bring on board family members or bring on board their best friends. Talk to them best friends and help them to understand the condition, because many people don't understand suicide. Talk to their best friend or talk to the family member you have grouped on, because there's a family member they are comfortable with. Do psychoeducation about depression and suicide. Then the part of the intervention, what you have to know about depression is that it is the most treatable mental illness among the 22 categories. So the moment the person is given medication, the symptoms of suicide will go down, because remember, depression and suicide are Siamese twins. So what we target when we are curing suicide, we actually target depression. So this person, they need to go to a facility for further assessment. For example, the government is trying to expand mental health services for mental health. But even here in Madara, we have outpatient where you can take them for outpatient clinic. They'll go through further assessment. That assessment will establish the levels of depression. They are given antidepressant, then they stabilize. The moment they stabilize, you take them through psychotherapy. Psychotherapy, which is counseling, will help you to know other underlying issues that medical doctors cannot handle, so that you can help them to process those underlying issues. And then once they're able to process those underlying issues, they will not relapse. Yani, as they are taking medication, they are being cancelled. As they are taking medication, they are being cancelled. So they will not relapse. So that is what I will tell you. But definitely, I will tell you for sure that when the symptoms of depression are reduced, even whatever the tendencies for suicide will be reduced. But they need medication, especially when it is persistent. Because by the time they become that suicidal, the symptoms of depression are high. So thank you very much, Tabitha Susan. I hope that helps you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Oteo. If you could tell us the relationship between bereavement, depression, and suicide in a minute, please. Thank you.
I just want to echo what Dr. said on the previous question, that there's a need to, you see, majority of the people are suicidal, they feel they're not listened to. If you listen to these people non-judgmentally, and you ensure that they are safe, especially if they listen to you, sometimes they may not want to listen to you, but look for a way as a layman. Don't judge them, listen to them, don't ask them why questions, listen to them, what is making, when, how. That is enough. You play that they listen to you, and the moment they have listened to you, please try as much as possible to ask questions that are related, like how do they want to kill themselves and blah 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 blah, and try to remove the danger. And once you have done that, as a lay person, you can refer to a professional who can be able to assist you. Now, to answer my question that is directed to me is, as I said, we have situational depression. Situational depression meaning that either when you get a loss of property, loss of life, or terminal illnesses, naturally, you will feel overwhelmed, you feel sad, you feel hopeless. Sometimes you even question God. So that is usually short-lived. That is usually related to that. But sometimes they may persist and translate to clinical depression. And when that happens, that now tells you that it has moved from situational depression to clinical depression. And the clinical depression now, you need help from a professional. Now, as a loved one, what do you need to do as a loved one? Please support this person. You have a way, you have a friend who can get me psychology, a professional psychiatry. That person can be assisted to go through the grief process. Because what usually happens, people are grieving, we have what we call the grief process. Maybe you are shocked, you are numb, and you move to the next level, like you don't believe it, you live in denial, then reaches a point where you feel like you become angry to God, even yourself. If there's something that you didn't do that you thought could have saved the life of this person, then of course you feel guilty, and then after that you feel angry to yourself, feel angry to other people, feel angry even to God. Then if you follow the normal grief process, you reach a level of acceptance, but that always doesn't happen. The grief can be complicated. The grief can be long term. So in that case, you need a professional helper. A professional
Thank you.
helper who has skills to assist, who can be able to assess some of the underlying reasons why maybe or what makes you not to go through the normal grief process. You need a professional who can conceptualize and understand what are other things that are making your condition severe. You need a professional helper who has clinical skills on how he can put you on a treatment plan and implement that plan. So my answer is this. That's the case that needs a professional helper. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We also have some people whose hands are raised up. We have Magdalene Wamugunda. Magdalene, if you could ask your question, we are there for you. Yes, please, Magdalene. Here, as we maybe wait on Magdalene, Hilda Rea's hand is also up. Hilda, you want to share with us something?
Yes, I want to ask a question.
Yes, please.
I am asking, what do you do in a family
Yes.
whereby you found out that everyone is depressed and you, or as a firstborn, there is something which happened that make all of you depressed, or maybe someone dies in the family and you found out that that person was a breadwinner and the person died and he left everyone. And second, you find out that everybody in the family is depressed, and you are the person who is supposed to help these people, and you also is depressed.
Yes.
And you don't know what to do, and you feel like you don't want to talk to anyone. Yeah, but you are the one who is there, who is supposed to help those your siblings or whatever in the family. What do you do? What do you go about the situation like that?
Yes. Hilda, what do you do in such a situation where everyone around you seems quite depressed? Dr. Agnes, you want to respond to that? Dr. Agnes, you want to respond to Hilda's concern?
Thank you, Hilda, for your question. Pardon?
Yes, Hilda shares that, Hilda, if I got you right, Hilda shares that in the family a lot has happened, a lot of bereavement is going on.
Hilda, please put up your mic. Okay, I've handed the question,
Hilda.
Dr. Thomas. Thank you very much.
Hilda,
Please
kindly.
put up your mic.
Yes, I will
I've
rephrase
handed
the
the question,
question.
Dr. Thomas. Thank you. I have handed the question.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Hilda, for asking the question. What happens is that there's usually when somebody who was the key figure in the family dies, there's a period of confusion. Actually, that is why we support people when their people die, because number one, they can even be stolen from, they get confused, people pick their documents, they use them to withdraw the money from the bank, they do so many things. That is why we actually become prefect for our friends. We're making sure that we know where their documents are, because there's an external support that is needed when somebody, the key person dies. But then, now you are saying that everyone in the family is depressed. Remember that when we lose somebody we love, there's what we call transient depression. Depression that is associated with loss and grief. But there's somebody who is left in charge of the other, who has to wake up earlier before the family can be around. If I'm getting you right, if I can guess, maybe that person now could be you. What we have been teaching the Dr. Hotel is the internal protective factors that are deep within us. When God created us, He didn't just create us. Created us with something that we call resilience. Please put off your mic, Rafa. Created us with something that we call resilience, and then gave us internal protective factors and external protective factors. At least God gave us a mouth. And God is very kind. He cannot deny us even a single friend we can speak to. So now that we have come to this seminar, we are telling you that deep within yourself, you actually have what it takes to seek help. Because the only thing your family need is somebody to take the lead. What does taking the lead mean? It means now that you have known that actually it is a normal thing to go through transient depression, but it is abnormal to remain there, because we are talking about positive psychology. You can now reach out. Reaching out means that you can now come to a counselor. Counselors, they know so many things. Why your family is confused is because they don't know where to start. But when you identify a counselor around the place you stay, and you yourself, you go and see the counselor, you explain to them what is happening, to listen to you, together with the counselor, you can now be able to bring the family members on board for family therapy. We usually call it family therapy. Sensitization, sorry, Rafa. Sensitization session where together with the therapist and together with the counselor, you are sensitized. Having told the counselor the story and empowered, and you have a beginning point. Now you get a beginning point. To develop a series of activities that must be done. We are able to identify whether we have support. I think we call social support. Please better put off your mic. This thing that we call social support is where we bring somebody on board who is reliable, somebody who is concerned about our family. And the counselors usually loop in people. Yeah, we loop in people deliberately to do that support. So don't feel disempowered, because we didn't come here to feel disempowered. We came here to tell you that you have what it takes to help your siblings to go to the next level. And it will take a very short time. The moment you see a counselor and you come for family therapy and you are sensitized, it will take a very short time for you to go back on your feet, know what should be done, and move on, because life must continue. Thank you very much, Dr. Thomas. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that insightful sharing. We've also got another question. Vanessa asks, does insomnia lead to suicidal thoughts? I would say indirectly, yes. Insomnia can actually lead to depression, and depression could lead to suicidal ideations or actions. We have a question from George Ondieki. This one I will put to Dr. Oteo. George Ondieki asks, why is depression criminalized in Kenya, despite it being a mental illness? And what can be done? What can experts do? You can answer that in a moment. It will be good for us.
Thank you so much, Kelly, for that question. It is very unfortunate that in the Kenyan Penal Code 226, 225, criminalizes suicide. Because it says that if a person makes an attempt to commit suicide, is supposed to be jailed, I think 3 years, if I'm not wrong. Then 25 talks about if a person aids or assists another one to commit suicide, is also supposed to be jailed. Very unfortunate. But I wanted to share that there are good things that are happening in our government. As I said, we are not coming here to paint the gloom picture of what mental health is. Like now, if we know or we remember very well in this 2020, there was the mental health task force that was formed to inform the government on what should be done. And part of the recommendations that they did, unfortunately, we have not reached yet, was to decriminalize suicide because the person needs help. He need not to be taken to jail. So that is the positive direction. Although we have not reached there, but the government at least it has the suicide prevention policy, I think 2021 to 2025, that really emphasizes that what needs to be done. And this comes from the recommendations that came from the task force. Even our mental health policy, that is 2015 to 2030, it really emphasizes on that. So we are on a positive direction, although we are not moving as fast as we wish. And that's why we are talking about that we need to move, and where need be our efforts such that we decriminalize suicide. This
Thank
Dr.
Okay,
Kinga, we can
my
hear you.
colleague has been.
Dr. Kinga, you're muted.
Thank you
Thank you.
for that. To you, Alex Mwanza, your hand has been up. You want to share something with us? Alex Mwanza, your hand has been up. Kindly unmute yourself and share.
Now, my question is, I've been going through a lot in my life, whereby I just feel like
Mwanza, we cannot get you clearly. Okay, Alex, if I may ask you to type your question, we will respond to it.
Yes, now my question
Kindly
is,
type your question on the message box.
okay, can you hear me right now?
We cannot hear you clearly.
I think we can hear him now. I think we can.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Alex, go ahead.
My question is, I've been having several headaches. I've been taking painkillers, left, right, and center. Sometimes I can't sleep. I wake up, I feel I'm in a dark tunnel. I don't know where the end. I feel like I'm so squeezed in a wall whereby I can't lift myself. Is this can it be a depression I'm going through?
Dr. Lydia, you want to respond to Alex Mwanza and connect him to some help?
Thank you, Alex Mwanza, for asking your question. We appreciate that you are able to ask it in this forum. And we may not necessarily say that you're going through depression. We might need to interact a little more to be able to answer that. But I think help is at hand. The fact that you are already noticing that you have, that some things are not going right is already a good indicator that you seem to be aware that something is not right. I could ask you to reach out on the number that we have written there. I'll write it again so that we can interact with you and talk a little more rather than talking about it right here. Is that okay with you, Alex? Alex, is that fine?
Yeah, that's okay with me. That's
Yeah.
okay that's okay with me. I'll try to reach you out, but I really hate that this thought of committing suicide, everything is not working for me. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll get, you can actually just call that number right away. You can just call
Yeah.
that number right away. Somebody will answer to you right now. Yeah. So
Thank,
thank you
thank
for
you.
actually asking and seeking help. All
Okay,
right, Dr.
Lindia,
thank
and
you.
on that note, Lindia and Thomas, and on that note, I would like to tell Florence to do the same thing what Dr. Lindia is saying. Florence on the page is saying, I've been going through depression and I've been suicidal. I have all the symptoms and don't have much support from the family. Please call the number that Dr. Lindia has requested you to call. We shall get in touch with you and we shall have a one-on-one where we can gather more information and then we can give you some way forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I can see we have so many questions that we cannot be able to answer them all in this session because of time. However, like Dr. Reedy has shared, there is a number that is on the message box. Please reach out and you will be connected to a therapist and you will get help. I want to give it back to you, Dr. Reedy, to wrap it up.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kinga, for taking us through the questions. I want to apologize to the panel, to the participants that we may not be able to answer all the questions right here, but our number is working. You can try it out. You can reach out. And in case you notice that you are you need help, please do not keep silent. I think what our panelists said is that all these conditions are treatable. Yes, familial suicide is treatable. Depression is treatable. All you need to do is reach out, seek help. Just like we go to the hospital to seek help when we are physically ill, even when we get mentally ill, we need to know that we can reach out and get help. It is normal to not be okay. It is normal to get a mental health condition. So let's reach out. Let's reach out. And as we come to the end, I'll be calling on our colleague, Dr. Mudoga, to wrap it up for us. And I want just to share our flyer for the next webinar. Please watch out for that. Sorry, what did I do? Can you see it? I don't seem to see it on my end. Can you see the web?
Not yet. Not yet.
Poster? Okay, I don't
Not
know.
yet.
No,
Sorry,
we can't see
I
it.
don't know.
It is not coming.
Yeah,
No.
I don't know what
It's
is
coming
happening.
now. Yes, come.
All right. Oh, fine. Yeah, there it is. Please check it out. We will send it. We will be using the same link.
You are
So if you
presenting
were able
yourself.
to log in,
Okay.
if you are able to log in today, that same link is what we shall be using next time. So in case even if you don't get the poster, just log in with the same link. It will be next week on Tuesday, same time, 7 p.m. to 8:30. Dr. Esther Mutoga, kindly just wrap it up for us, and thank you every one of you for coming in and for the participation. Mutoga, please.
Thank you, Dr. Ridia. Thank you, the panelists and our participants for coming on. And I'll just wrap it up in a minute or two, because I know that all of us have been very busy taking points home. So I'll just give a few takeaway points. We have heard that there's a relationship between depression and suicide. We saw that the prevalence of depression and suicide are very high globally, even back here locally in Kenya. So we have statistics that we are given quite high. And we learned that more women experience depression, while more men die of suicide. And you are given some of the reasons why this is so. So I think by now we are a bit more self-aware. If you are a woman or a lady, you have an idea of what are the symptoms to look out for. what are the risk factors. If you are a man, the same, we are told that men may be at more risk because of various reasons. So I know that all of us have various takeaways and some of the risk factors we need to be aware of, because awareness is very important. Include the biological factors that may lead to depression. For example, we learned about the family history, the neurotransmitters. We also have the other group, the psychological factors. For example, trauma, negativity, loss of ability, and then you also have sociological factors, like lack of social points, and you have an idea what are these risk factors. So be aware of them so that you are able to mitigate depression or suicide before it comes on you. So being aware is very important. For suicide, we know that there are different types of suicide. All of them are very serious. Like there is dying by suicide, where somebody actually dies. There is also attempted suicide. You just attempt, but you don't die. And there's suicidal ideations or suicidal plans. So all of them are very serious. So be on the lookout for them in your friends, in your family. Right now, if I share, this is called self-disclosure. I have a relative who has committed suicide, not in buried yet. I'm like, or planning this thing, but I'm learning about it when it is too late. So let us not get there before it is too late. We are learning these things have happened, and then we also learn about the red flags.
I didn't understand that.
The red flags for suicide, and we saw that there are very many. So please read more from your points, whatever points you took up. And then we also learned that caregivers are more vulnerable because the caregivers, we learned about 20% of caregivers are likely to get depression. So if you're a caregiver, and I think we are all caregivers, we all take care of our people, even though we don't work in the hospitals or, even though we are not doctors or nurses, we are all taking care of people who are living with us, people who are our relatives or friends. So if you're a caregiver, you need also a lot of social support and a lot of resources to take care of yourself so that you don't get into depression. And then we also learn about many protective factors, like some people have got some resilience, some characteristics within them, like their personality. Okay, we also have resources around us, which are not in us, like social support from family, friends, self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and many others that are mentioned there. For treatments, we saw that, you can have medication for depression, but depression it's not really curable. But we have medications that can help manage the symptoms, which we call antidepressants. We also have nutritional therapy. We may also have surgery or like electroconvulsive therapy. But in our field of psychology, we talk more about psychotherapy, where we talk about evidence-based practice. And there are very many techniques that we use, so many that we use. So when you come educators, please come. If you've got these issues you're asking about, you'll be able to, we are not able to apply those methods. So I think what I was trying to capture was in 1 or 2 minutes because of time factor. So thank you very much, everybody. I hope you all take away something of help to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Esther, for that summary. I'm sure those who came late have been able to catch a point or two of what was shared. Let us all remember that we can take responsibility. And so let us move. Now that we have stopped, we have listened, please don't stop there. Take action. Take action and start with yourself. Remember that it all starts with us. So thank you very much for joining. Thank you for asking questions. Thank you for participating. And we look forward to having you next Tuesday, same time. So keep it here next Tuesday, next time, and you can see what we shall be discussing. Please invite your friends, invite your family members. From psychology department, we are saying thank you very much. And we are grateful to see you. Have a good night. Have a good week. And
have a good night.
taking care. Yeah, thank you. You can unmute and say good night and say goodbye.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Good night. Good night. Bye.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you so much.
Good night and thank you.